Welcome to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me is a man who is still crying from after watching Knightriders for the first time. It's Adam Hodgins.
Yes, it is, and yes, I am. This movie it's like when you find a treasure you never knew you were looking for.
Yeah, you're right.
This is what happens when you watch Knight Rider.
So we recorded the Constantine podcast, and you were sobbing uncontrollably during it.
Yeah. There's just so much emotion. I feel like Anchorman in the phone booth watching Knight Rider. I just don't know how to feel.
Drinking milk?
Just drinking milk is a bad choice.
So, all right, this movie I'd never heard about, and so you and I, we kind of freestyle our topics. Like we tried a while back to kind of do, hey, this is what we'll do next, but we kind of let it freestyle. So we had Peter Rabbit, we had Constantine, yep. And now we have Knightriders. And I had never heard of this movie, and a month ago, you were like, hey, Mark, there's a movie called Knightriders with Ed Harris. You should watch it. I'm like, okay. So I figured we had done Icebreaker, and then we had done Steel Dawn. So I was envisioning maybe Ed Harris as a motorcycle riding vigilante.
Right.
And I looked the movie up.
That is not what this is.
Yeah, I looked the movie up, and I see George Romero directed it. So I immediately sent you a message like, holy crap, George Romero directed this? I didn't even know that he had a movie called Knightriders.
And it's like, I'm a big Romero fan, big Ed Harris fan, and it's like, I can't believe I didn't know this existed.
I mean, we listened to the commentary. So here's what y'all need to do. Go on, if you haven't watched it, go on Tubi, TUBI.com, and you can watch the movie, very limited commercials. Then go to Shout Factory TV, and you can listen to Knightriders with the commentary. Now, it's 2.5 hours long. But the commentary is really great. But in this movie, Romero and Tom Savini, just one of the greatest makeup effects guys of all time, they kept saying that this was the best summer of their lives. But then it
just looks like a party.
Yeah, they said they took over a hotel like a Days Inn and just partied the entire summer. And it got to the point where Romero's wife had to kind of keep people away from Romero because they were keeping him up at night and he wasn't sleeping. But they did keep complaining that this movie did not make any cheddar, as Romero said. But all right, so I gotta ask you a question, Adam.
Hit me with it.
Who was this movie for?
I think this movie was for Tom Savini. Like, I feel like it was just because it's one of those things where he's a great makeup artist. He's fantastic. But every now and then he sneaks into a movie. And I feel like a lot of times he's already doing makeup on the movie, or he's doing props on the movie. Like he was in Dusk Till Dawn, but he was like the prop guy on that movie. And
Dawn of the Dead.
But again, he's doing makeup on that. So this is one of those where he sneaks in. And in my mind, like in the fantasy version of this movie, it was Romero being like, you know what, Tom Savini, I'm going to make you a star. I got this movie for you. And I think that's what happened.
And just so this movie shot for 90 days in outside of Pittsburgh. Really bad weather. They said it rained probably 80 of the days. Did you hear the story where the second day of shooting, a tornado wiped out their set? So then they went to go shoot rain cover, and they shot in this place, chopped down some trees, lit the fires in the studio, but then that studio flooded.
It seemed ripe with tragedy from the get-go.
Yeah, 90 days for this movie. I mean, it is 2.5 hours. And this movie reminds me a lot of Guillermo del Toro's Crimson Peak, which is a 2-hour gothic romance / ghost story that costs about $80 million. And for me, it's like they're completely different movies. But I just wonder how studios A gave them money for it, and B. And now I asked you earlier who is it for, but this movie Knightriders I love. But can you imagine the general populace's reaction to watching a 2.5 hour movie about a traveling Renaissance fair who do fighting on dirt bikes and the infighting in between them?
Yeah, so this movie came out in 1981, and so it's in that weird time, I think, where like movies were being made. Well, of course they're being made, but they didn't really, they're in this refining moment. So like in the 70s, you get these really great movies, but like the sound isn't mixed well, and I think they're still kind of figure it out. And by the time they get to the 80s, they're trying to do like, we want to do some fantasy, we want to do special effects, we want to do, adventure stories, but we don't know how. and they're trying to figure out how to do that. And I think that's what this really is. I think it's George Romero trying to make an action movie, but he doesn't know how because he's used to doing horror.
Yeah, no, I get you. And I found a perfect thing about this movie. Somebody wrote that Knightriders is about 50% scenes of kick-ass moto jousting, 40% philosophizing around the campfire, and 10% lyrical shots of King William trying to exist in the same landscape as fast food restaurants.
Yes, that's, I think, a perfect thing.
And
to sum this up.
I thought the shot at the end was pretty beautiful when he drove by the McDonald's. He has his little helmet on.
There's a couple good, because Romero's a good director. Like, content aside, he does his job well.
Yeah.
But this has a 75% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, it's good. This is a good movie. I just think, so let's say people go into Crimson Peak thinking it's going to be a horror movie. They're going to be like, what did I get myself into? So Knightriders, this movie's, the poster, the games, the romance, the spirit, Camelot is a state of mind. And the poster has Ed Harris on it, not Ed Harris, but a knight on a motorcycle. So you're thinking this is the Warriors, mixed with a jousting movie.
Or it looks like a Mad Max-esque future where like the royal families have come back into play. So I would say for the first 45 to an hour of this movie, I was trying to figure out the rules of the universe.
Yeah, because nothing happens, right? Like
they just do their job. They just go to do their fair. So you're kind of, it's like it's a documentary about this fair that's happening. Like that's kind of what the first hour is like, because it's almost shot in real time. We get to see a lot of the patrons that are there, and Stephen King is there, eating a hot dog or a hoagie or whatever it is.
Yeah, Hoagie Man. So there's just like this picture of like, here's what these people do. But then there's these little hints where you're like, is this real to them, or is it a show? Or like, because there was a moment where they're like, oh, he'll never, what happens if he beats the king? Will he become the king? And I'm like, well, is this scripted or is it not scripted? Like what's really happening here? And you don't really know. Yeah. And the beginning, I love the intro of this movie. So
it's my favorite 3 minutes of film ever.
I mean, do you want to break it down then, since you love it so much?
Yeah.
All right.
So again, I was watching The Substitute on Tubi. Tom Berenger.
Wait, what's the Treat Williams one?
That was Substitute 2. Was it not?
Got it.
Yeah. But that was like the less offensive kind of like Dangerous Minds where the kids don't learn anything was what that movie was. So I was watching that because it's like I have this affection for Tom Berenger. Like my dad and I bonded over Tom Berenger. Like Sniper was my dad's favorite movie.
Whoa. What about Platoon, though? Did that scare the crap out of you with Tom Berenger?
Yes, it was great. But my parents went on a date to go see Sniper. And so my dad says, I'll go get the popcorn, you go get the tickets. And so my mom and her naivete went to the ticket counter and said, I need 2 tickets for Snipper. And then the guy said, you have no idea what you're about to watch, do you? And she goes, nope, I have no idea. So she just really trusted my dad to take her to go see a movie about a sniper. So I was watching that, and then it just said up next, because it just kind of plays the next movie, Knightriders. And I was like, oh, and I thought in my mind, just without seeing the poster, with Knightriders, I was like, maybe this is a documentary about the making of like Knight Rider the show, or like the cars that were involved in that. So I just let it play. So I had no idea it was coming. And so it opens with like this Raven kind of nightmare scene, and then a super jacked Ed Harris just
his arms in this movie. He's 30 years old. He's only 30.
No, I looked at him and I was like, that's who should have played Captain America in 1980.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
If they made a Captain America movie, that's who it should have been.
Yeah. Ed Arms Harris.
Right. So he sits up in the forest naked, and I'm like, okay, like something's happening. And then this woman sits up behind him and like kind of does that like, oh, or I'm going to put my head on your shoulder. And they're looking like so meaningfully out into the distance. And so I'm like, what's going to happen? And then it cuts to Ed Harris in a lake, whipping himself with a reed.
Flagellating?
Just like giving himself penance or something. I'm like, what is going on? And then you see the woman, her mother, and she's putting herself into her like matron's gown, like a kind of royal medieval looking dress. And I'm like, oh, maybe this is like a knight story. Like I totally bought into it. Then it cuts to another shot of Ed Harris like full out naked, kneeling in a field, just like polishing his sword. And I know that sounds like it's a euphemism, but he's literally polishing his sword.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, like this is a thing. I guess we're going to watch a medieval movie, and I'm down with that. And then we see a close-up of their heads, and he's wearing what looks like a ridiculous knight's helmet, and she's behind him, and and there's a scene where they like slowly put their crowns on.
Yep.
Like they dress each other, and so like, oh, this is the king and queen. They're going to go and rule over their lands. And so then you see their heads, and like trees whipping by like they're riding a horse, zoom out and very abruptly to reveal they're on a motorcycle. And I was like, what is going on? And so I wanted you to have that same experience. Remember I said to you, like, Mark, you need to watch it without looking at the poster. Like, just go in blind if you can. And then they go, and I'm like, okay, well, is this like a dystopian future? Is this like a time, like, what is this movie? And then they get to like this Renaissance fair where driving around on motorcycles, which I think if existed would be something that my wife would definitely want to go to. And I'm not going to lie, I'd probably go there because we've been to medieval times, but imagine that on motorcycles. So it just looks like this real snapshot of 1981, where this could only exist in 1981.
Only in 1981.
All right. So like if there was a casting call and someone called you and I, Mark, and they said, we're going to reboot Knightriders for 2019, we would definitely go there and we would like commit. We would be so earnestly acting in this movie. But we'd probably be the only ones in 2019 where like things are pretty tongue in cheek. But here in 1981, they are all bringing their A game. No one is here pretending that this is like everyone's acting better than this movie deserves.
Oh, and it feels like a family there.
Yep.
100%. Even the extras that are part of the tour, they're working in the background. And they look, they're not doing extra walks. Like, this feels like a very naturalistic, and maybe that's why he shot it over 90 days in a field, because I think there was just a day in, day out routine. And also, they said in Pittsburgh, everyone would just die for Romero. Like, they would help him 180%, because these movies are all, this had $1 million budget in 81. That's not a lot.
No.
And they shot for 3 months, which is insane.
Here's the thing. We talked about Constantine the other night.
Yeah.
Which had a budget of $100 million. And you asked the question, you're like, I wonder where all that money went. And I said, well, probably all went to Keanu. But in this movie, you can see every dollar of that $1 million.
And probably some of the dollars of the cast and crew.
I would not be surprised if they were like, bring your own armor.
Yep.
And then Tom will tweak it a bit if it's not up to par. Because I'd say the armor is very inconsistent from night to night.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it changes for sure. And also, Tom, during the commentary, Tom Savini said he's like, I have that too. He's like, I took that home too. And Romero's like, how much stuff did you take from the set?
That's amazing. I think I hate thievery, but I love when people take stuff home from movie sets. I feel like I'd be that guy.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like Savini probably put so much into this movie as far as stunts. He also had a separate contract to do the blood stuff. So he invested himself in every aspect of this movie. So I'd have let him take whatever he wanted. I'd have let him take the campers home.
Absolutely. So I will say this though, there was a neat or weird plot device, early on. And so we're led to believe that this is kind of like pro wrestling where it's predetermined and it's kind of like it's a show they're putting on. But then like Tom Savini's like, oh, I made this like legit metal bludgeon. Can I use it in the show? And there's this whole conversation like, well, you better check with the king. Okay. And then he ends up using it and then he dethrones the king and all hell breaks loose and all the other knights are getting involved because they're like, oh no, Billy's not going to be the king anymore. And like Morgan's going to get on the throne. We can't have that. And it's just this melee of like panic and so it turns out it's like, this is